Right, the time's now 2:30 here in the UK. We will begin this FAA CAA Maintenance Implementation Procedures webinar now. My name is Robert Crawford. I'm the media lead here at the Civil Aviation Authority. My role is to just give a brief introduction to this session before I hand over to my colleague Christopher Lawrence, who will do a brief introduction and introduce the panelists here today. We are recording the session and it will be made available on our YouTube channel once we've finished the session, possibly in a couple of days or so. As you will have seen, we did issue a short media news story this morning on the new agreement, so you can see that on the CAA website. Just a little bit of housekeeping, if you could all kindly please keep your cameras off just to ensure that the bandwidth is obviously all okay. And if you do have a question, because there'll be time for questions at the end with our panelists, if you could put your questions in the Q&A function, then we'll be able to adjudicate that and make sure that your questions are answered once we get to that. So don't use the chat function, use the Q&A function that's available on Zoom. So I will now be quiet and I will hand over to Christopher, who will do a brief introduction and welcome you all to the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Good afternoon all, and welcome to the FAA CAA seminar about the maintenance implementation procedure. I'm Chris Lawrence. I'm the Chief Surveyor at the UK CAA. Our colleagues in both the FAA and the CAA have been working hard on this new procedure, and this afternoon is aimed at informing the wider community on what this means for them moving forward. So without further ado, I would like to hand you over to Neil Williams, who will start the next piece of work about the MIP.
Okay, well, thank you, Chris, for opening the show. Just by way of introduction to this, as many of you know, we have a bilateral aviation safety agreement with the FAA that's been in place for quite some time. Initially, we put in place a set of procedures that gave us a 2-year window after leaving the EU, under which we would then establish what we hope will be our final position with the EU, and therefore we could reflect that in any other international agreements. As it's turned out, the situation with the EU remains that we don't have a maintenance annex agreement to our bilateral arrangements, and so we've now had to kind of conclude our final position with our colleagues in the FAA. So I'm really grateful to the people, you can see the names on the screen here, but particularly to my colleagues Paul Cloutier and John Masters and Carl Johnson, who we've worked together with very well over the last few months to put together these new implementation procedures. I have to say they mostly affect organizations in the US, but we do want to make sure we share with you what's happening on this side of the Atlantic, so that everybody's clear about how the situation will be into the future. So if we could have the next slide, please. Okay, and the next one after that. Thank you. So the first set of changes really apply to the maintenance implementation procedures. So just a little recap of the structure of the bilateral agreement. There's a high-level agreement, state-to-state agreement, that was signed in 1995 between the UK and the USA, that in its original form just had some procedures for the oversight of airworthiness certification matters and production. Later, there became an annex that dealt with the oversight of simulators, and that's not shown on this diagram today, but that's really because it's outside the area of airworthiness. But on the other side, when we reinvigorated these procedures prior to leaving the EU, we established a set of maintenance implementation procedures, and sitting underneath that, the maintenance annex on the maintenance agreement guidance, or the MAG, that sets out the actual procedures for obtaining an approval, what's acceptable, how do you go about preparing your supplements, etc. So my colleagues will talk a little bit about that later on. But for me today, I'm just going to take you through at a high level what are in the maintenance implementation procedures, as these form the basis of the special conditions that still exist between ourselves and the FAA, and they really form the basis of the things that have to be addressed in people's manuals as a part of obtaining approval to release their goods and services into the other party's system. So if we could just go to the next one, please. Thank you. So it is a document. The MIP is being published on our website today. Our colleagues in the FAA will be publishing the document themselves in the next few days, and we hope to have the new maintenance annex guidance published and available on our website very soon. We're still working with colleagues in the FAA just to get it ready for publication, but all the matters of substance have been agreed, and we're ready to share that with you today. Next slide, please. So the formal bit of the maintenance implementation procedures is they address the approval and the monitoring of maintenance facilities under the agreement between the US and the UK. And as I say, the most significant part about those procedures is that they contain a list of special conditions that have to be addressed if you want to obtain an approval in the other party's system. So if you want to obtain an approval in the UK system, then in the US, that is, you'll have to comply with the special conditions that we've established. And if you're an organisation in the UK and you want to obtain an approval in the FAA system, you also have to comply with the special conditions. Could you just go to the next slide, please? Okay, so just an overview of the actual document itself. There's a general chapter. There's a whole section on reciprocal acceptance of findings of compliance, how we will work together to ensure that we cooperate on all matters around, in this case, aircraft maintenance, the technical assistance we will provide to one another in order to make sure that the arrangement functions smoothly. But I think the things that we want to focus on today and the things that are most relevant for industry partners are the transition provisions, how we deal with continued confidence in the arrangement, and of course the fees. And also we talked a little bit about the special conditions as well. Can I go to the next slide, please? Okay, so main focus for today, oh, it's okay, you can go on to the next one, is really the special conditions for organizations in the US because they're new, yeah, and also the transition provisions. So as I explained at the start of this part of the presentation, the current arrangements we have in place with the FAA come to an end on the 31st of December this year. So we have to do something to ensure that we have a set of working procedures in place that go on beyond the end of 2022. Now, this obviously needed for business continuity, but we also need to recognise that the end of 2022 is the point where all the transitional arrangements that we have in place post-Brexit come to an end. So what we've been able to do working with our colleagues in the FAA is to establish a new set of special conditions for organisations in the US who wish to provide maintenance services for businesses in the UK. And those special conditions really are fundamentally unchanged from those that you'd be familiar with under the EASA arrangements. So those special conditions are applicable to organisations in the US. And for organisations here in the UK, there's also no change to the special conditions. So the things that you're doing today to hold a FAR 145 repair station approval are the same things that we'll be looking for you to do going forward. The main change in the implementation procedures for us is really a reduction in the amount of paperwork that passes between the two regulators. We've tried to slim that down wherever we can to ensure that we're only passing essential information between us and therefore reducing the burden wherever we can. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so if you're an organization in the US, the process for obtaining approval should be quite a familiar one, in the sense that there's an application process for approval which is triggered from a form that is actually contained within the maintenance annex guidance, and my colleagues will talk about that later. There is a step in there to demonstrate there is a genuine need to hold the approval, because we don't want to be asking colleagues in the FAA to be going out and doing oversight work. Thank you. Could you just stay on that one? Don't want them to be doing oversight work when there's no actual business need for it. And then there's a determination of whether a supplement is needed to to the repair station manual. It is highly likely that a separate supplement from the one the colleagues have developed to comply with the EASA special conditions will be needed. However, much of the content of that will be very similar, so I won't have to start from a blank sheet of paper. And as I say, there will be CA supplements required for organizations in the US. There's also a renewal process, so the approvals will be valid for 2 years at a time, and there's some fees that are payable to the CAA, so the process is all set out about how you can arrange that and pay us our fees, and we will issue the approval certs. Could we go to the next slide, please, Robert? Thank you. So probably the last thing from me is about transition periods. So as these new arrangements come into effect at the end of this year, we recognise fully that it might not be possible, well, it's highly unlikely anybody will be ready to comply with the new requirements straight away. So we've agreed quite an extended transition period, which runs through to the 31st of December 2024. What we recommend is that organizations in the US apply for and obtain approval from us at the point in time when they're renewing their EASA approval. Now, this really helps our colleagues in the FAA, because they'll be able to do one evaluation exercise, and as a result of that, they'll be able to renew the EASA approval and also make the recommendation to us to issue a CA approval. However, if your renewal falls very early, in the very early part of next year, you might not be ready for that, so you can still do that as a separate and independent exercise, as long as it's completed for the 31st of December 2024. Now, FAA colleagues don't really want people holding back, and I can understand that, and wait until the end of the transition period and then coming forward with lots of requests, because if you overwhelm the system and we can't cope with it, then you could land up, there could be a gap in the period of approval coverage. So I do recommend that if you're doing business with organizations in the States, you encourage them to go for approval at an appropriate moment in time, when there's plenty of time to get their new approval certificate in place. As I said before, a supplement would normally be required, and the content of that shouldn't be anything new to organizations that are familiar with the EASA system. The last point I wanted to make before handing over to my colleague Carl was that parts that are released to service prior to 2024, the end of 2024, on a FAA 8130-3 dual release, that's the EASA dual release, can continue to be installed after this date. Okay, so as long as they're released to service, we will recognize before the end of 2024, then they're good to go. So there should be no problem with parts that you're holding on your shelves or in stock somewhere. They can still be used. Okay, I think that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Carl. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carl Christian, I'm an Airworthiness Manager. So I'm just now going to take you through the Maintenance Agreement Guidance, the MAG. If we just go on to the next slide, please, Robert. Okay, there's 5 parts to the MAG, but I'm going to focus on the bits that are applied to industry really, which is section A, B and C, which is interaction between the FAA and the CAA, the requirements for aircraft maintenance organisations located in the US, in the US rather, and requirements for repair stations located in the UK. I think, as Neil has already said, the biggest difference really applies to organisations in the US. So UK maintenance organisations that either hold an approval or will be holding approval in the US. I think when it comes to organisations in the UK, I don't believe you'll see a great deal of difference between what you understand and what you're familiar with today to what this now means under this revision of the MAG. Okay, so we're going to do MAG section A, interaction between the FAA and the CAA. So next slide, please, Robert. So the UK left EASA when the UK left the EU, and the UK retained all the safety legal framework when we did leave. And then US-based repair stations, when it complies with the special conditions, may apply for a UK 145 certificate on or after the 1st of January 23. Now that's when the latest revision of the MAG enters into force, the 1st of January. So organisations won't be able to apply until that date for organisations based in the US. And as Neil said, the important aspect is until the end of December 2024, organisations can still rely on a dual release and the EASA FAA dual release up until the end of the year. So if there's one point to take away from today, I think that's one of the key points I would take away. Okay, thank you, Robert. Okay, a bit more on the interaction between FAA and CAA. So the transition arrangements. So repair stations in the US, what we're looking for is organisations to make the transition and attain a UK approval by December the 31st, 2024. And ideally, as Neil has said, the time we were looking to do organisations in the US to do that is when time comes to renew their EASA approval. And the main reason is for that. So the FAA and the CAA are not inundated with applications all at once, and we can spread it out throughout the 2 years. So I think part of this presentation now is it's about giving UK industry the understanding of, in terms of your suppliers, whether you are a 145 or whether you are an AOC, it's about giving you that understanding of what will be expected from or what you can expect to receive from a UK maintenance organisation or repair station based in the US. Once an organisation does hold a UK approval, that we will publish a list on the CAA website of all the organisations that are approved in the US. Okay, thank you, Robert. So there's some fundamentals when it comes to the interaction between ourselves and the FAA. So a certificate issued by an authority may not exceed the ratings or scope of work contained in the certificate by the other authority. And what I mean by that is the whole principle of the agreement between the UK and the US is you cannot go beyond your scope of approval that is based in your home territory. So if you're a UK 145 and you hold an FAA repair station, the activity you can undertake for an FAA release has to be within the scope of your UK 145 rating and scope of approval. And that works both ways, whether you're in the UK or whether you're in the US. So maintenance on UK registered aircraft must comply with the special conditions. And those special conditions are what you are with familiar today, which is things like you will have to have a supplement, you'll have to make an application, and you'll have to allow access to the CAA and the FAA. So they're not overly burdensome when it comes to the special conditions. So UK organisations in the US, they will receive a CAA Form 3, an approval certificate, and the scope of that certificate will be based upon the FAA approval of 14 CFR Part 145 Air Agency Certificate. And then repair stations located in the UK, as I've said, those ratings limitations are dependent upon the UK 145 approval. Okay. Thank you, Robert. A little bit on acceptance of parts. So for components, this is from, so what's acceptable in terms of an FAA release, 8130-3, CAA Form 1, or an EASA Form 1 acceptance. So the CAA recognises an 8130 with a dual FAA EASA release up until the end of December 2024, which is a key element, as I've said. And also an FAA 8130 issued as a FAA CAA release, or a single release by a repair station, CAA release that is also acceptable. There is a table within the MAG when it gets signed and when it gets released. I'd point you to Section A, Appendix 4, that gives you all the different scenarios of what is acceptable. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Okay. Thank you, Robert. So I'm going to talk now about MAG Section B, which is requirements for a UK maintenance organisation located in the United States. Next slide, please. So again, although obviously the audience here is a UK audience, I think it's important that as a UK organisation, you understand what is the process for a US-based repair station, what they need to do, and how the process is going to work both from an FAA perspective and a CAA perspective. So the first thing is an organisation seeking an approval have to submit an application as SRG 1783, and that application covers both a renewal, change amendment, and the initial approval, and that application goes to the FAA. It doesn't come to the CAA at this stage. As Neil said, there's a need to demonstrate need, and that can be based on a work order or something along those lines, and then produce a customized CAA supplement to the repair station manual and send that to the FAA. And again, that supplement, there's some guidance in the form of Appendix 1 that sets out what needs to be part of that supplement if you are an FAA repair station. Then lastly, the applicant has to comply with CAA fees and charges. So there is a fee associated with holding a UK approval, and that's set out in our fees and charges. So it's like a twin process where the application, the supplement, the demonstration of need goes to the FAA, and then the applicant also goes on our website, and that will be released soon. And they pay the charges direct to the CAA. Okay, thank you, Robert. Okay, so again, FAA responsibilities. So the FAA will conduct an audit of the repair station. They'll review the application, review the supplement. They'll check that the special conditions as part of the quality assurance function and any other applicable special conditions. And any open findings from the audit will have to be closed prior to the recommendation for certification. Okay. Thank you, Robert. So once from CAA responsibility, so when we received the package from the FAA, which is the application, a copy of the FAA repair station certificate, the audit report. We'll review the pack from the FAA. We should have received a payment from the applicant. And then once we've done that and we're satisfied, the CAA issues the CAA Form 3 approval certificate with a 2-year validity. Important point to consider or be aware of, when we issue the certificate, if you're a UK organisation, you'll be used to seeing 2 pages. Page 1 of the CAA Form 3 has got the name and address. It'll have the FAA approval number, any special conditions, and the UK approval number. Page 2, which is what you'll be familiar with as a UK-based repairs maintenance organisation, gives the ratings and limitations. We won't be issuing a page 2 because the rating and limitations is based upon the FAA certificate and associated op specs. So there is a slight difference there. And then once all of that has been processed within the CAA, then we'll add the organisation to the CAA website list of organisations with FAA approval. Thank you, Robert. So there's a renewal. As I say, the approval has a 2-year validity period. The renewal submission goes to the FAA, including those things there, demonstrated need for renewal, and what that includes, a work order, revised supplement if applicable as well. An applicant can't exercise the privileges of a UK 145 past the validation date or the expiry date of the certificate. So it's important that a US-based repair station allows sufficient time to process the application and get it to the CAA in order for us to renew the FAA repair station UK approval. And then again, the approval holder pays the annual renewal charge direct to CAA, and that will be invoiced to the approval holder in the US. Okay. Thank you, Robert. Okay, a little bit on changes now. So there'll be some changes from a US-based repair station that will require a certificate change, so which will involve activities from ourselves. So it's really around what's on that page 1 or that certificate from a UK approval perspective. So if there's a change of name, change of address, change of repair station certificate number, then we would have to reissue the UK approval certificate, the CAA Form 3, to the repair station in the US. There are changes that won't require a certificate change, including things like the counter manager, ratings, fixed locations, but even something like change of scope wouldn't require a certificate change from us, because that scope, as I've said, is based on the US 14 CFR Part 145 approval or certificate. And again, it may well be the case that these changes will require amendment to the supplement and the op specs, including any additional fixed locations. Okay, thank you, Robert. A little bit on the supplement. So it's covered in section B of Appendix 1 of the MAG. It includes things like guidance on what's acceptable in terms of an 8130-3 single or dual release, CAA, FAA dual release, the release of aircraft after maintenance statement, the fact that an organisation has to have a quality assurance function that looks at those elements contained within the supplement and those elements required by the special conditions. It includes things like provision of hangar space for maintenance, human factors, and line stations. The locations must have an author. So this is about if you're an FAA repair station holding a UK approval and you want to add an additional location to release, let's say, a UK registered aircraft, that location has to be on part of the FAA approval before you can add it onto the UK approval. It's an important aspect. And then a repair station's quality system must cover each location that the repair station has on its certificate or in its supplement annually. Okay. Thank you, Robert. A little bit on line stations in the US. So the CAA certificate covers line stations under the surveillance of the FAA. So to release, as I said, to release a G-Reg aircraft in the US from a line station, that line station has to be listed on the op specs under D107 before it can be added to release a UK registered aircraft. And the procedures ensure that a repair station is currently authorised to perform line maintenance, and then making sure that those special conditions remain compliant for each location when support of a UK registered aircraft or UK operator. Thank you, Robert. Work away from a fixed location. So if a repair station is requested to perform work on a UK registered aircraft outside the territory of the United States, that is possible. And that is based upon two scenarios. One, if the repair station does not hold a D100 authorization. So in that case, they'd have to apply to the FAA with the necessary details. And the FAA would look at that application, contact the CAA and ensure that it meets the criteria as noted in the note at the bottom of the slide. Whereas a repair station that holds off-spec D100, so which does allow on a recurring basis for an FAA organization to work under that off-spec item. Again, both of those scenarios does require the FAA to be informed of such a case, and it's really used for urgent defect rectification or non-routine maintenance, e.g. an AOG situation to work on a UK registered aircraft outside of the territory of the United States. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so that was MAG section B. This section really is about so repair stations located in the United Kingdom. I think, as I said before, that the major difference or the change, what we're talking about today, is for the US-based organisations. If you are a UK-based FAA repair station, there isn't a great deal of change, so which is good. So the UK organisations have already transitioned to the new UK-US MAG, and this is a revision to that MAG to allow US-based repair stations to apply for a UK approval. The same process that you are familiar with as a UK-based organisation holding an FAA repair station licence in terms of what you need to do for an initial, a change or renewal remains the same. So submitting the required documentation that comes to the CAA, not to the FAA. We process that documentation, things like the 8130, the 8110-3, and once we've done all of that, we send that off to the FAA for them to process whether it's an initial or a change. Okay, thank you, Robert. So what we'll kind of show UK repair stations located in the UK. So the kind of things that we're talking about is, of course, to hold an FAA approval in the UK, you also have to hold a current UK 145 approval, and your FAA approval can't go beyond what the UK approval is. So the kind of things we're talking about is the level of capability, the demonstration of need to maintain a US aircraft or components, pay the fees, you comply to the information that is in the MAG, and you'll understand what's in the MIG and the MAG and any applicable FAA regulations. Same documents, as I said, same documents as I said before in terms of what is needed. You need an FAA supplement to your MOE and things like in 8310-3 if you want to apply or change your approval, and the repair station vital information. So things like the details of your accounting manager and quality manager. Okay, thank you, Robert. So a little bit on the acceptance of parts from a UK-based organisation. So I'd really point you to Appendix 4 of the MAG Section A, because that gives you all the details on different scenarios of what's acceptable. So the table has been updated primarily to reflect the CAA Form 1. We, of course, under the previous arrangement between the US and the EU, it referred to the EASA Form 1. So the major change has been reflecting the CAA acceptance or US acceptance of a CAA Form 1. What is acceptable in terms of scenario, as an example, in terms of a release, for example, if the input from an organisation for a part is on an 8130-3 with the box ticked for a single FAA release, if you fit that part to a higher assembly, then the output can be an 8130 single FAA release. But as I say, I think it's really important that you refer to the Appendix 4 in MAG Section A. It gives you all of those details. Okay, thank you, Robert. Just to remind everyone what the special conditions are for a UK-based organisation in Section C of the MAG. So it's very straightforward. It's submit an application, provide a supplement, and for the approval to be continually approved, you have to allow access to the regulators, the FAA and CAA, and comply with the regulations and special conditions. So it's high level. It's not overly burdensome in terms of the special conditions. Thank you, Robert. Okay, so the key takeaways. So no change for a UK-based organisation. The major difference is if you are a US-based repair station holding a UK approval, and we've gone over what that means in terms of gaining approval, the transitional arrangements, the application process, the renewal process, and change process. Transitions arrangements for the US-based organizations, again, until the end of December 2024, we will still accept an EASA with dual release, FAA dual release, as the basis of acceptance to be fitted onto a UK aircraft or part that's going to go onto a UK aircraft. Okay, thank you. So that's the key takeaways. Next slide, please. Okay, questions and answers. Thank you for listening.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Carl. So we will now start taking question and answers. I've already seen there's about 10 just in the Q&A. What I'm going to do is stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to ask the panelists if they could all kindly turn their cameras on so that you can obviously all see them. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I will kick things off. I will go in the order, but so obviously if you have any questions, please, as I say, do use the Q&A function, and obviously we'll put it to the panel. So the first question I've got here is from Ian Hodges. What is the criteria for if a supplement is required or not for US organisation gaining UK approval? I think Neil Williams, you said you'd like to answer this one.
Yes, certainly. So the answer to that question is pretty certain. You're going to always need to produce a supplement to obtain a UK approval, simply because things like we've specified the release to service statement that needs to be made in the supplement when you return an aircraft to service. It's where you'd have the instructions for filling out a CAA Form 1. So although the MAG says if your procedures don't include these things, we're pretty certain that you will have to produce, or an organisation in the US will have to produce a supplement in order to obtain the CAA approval. But as I say, much of the content is very, very similar to the EASA requirements. So for most organisations, this shouldn't be a difficulty, really. Thank you, Robert.
Brilliant. Thank you, Neil. And then just on to the second question. An anonymous attendee has said, apologies if I've missed this item. Who can provide the statement of need to support FAA approval? Is this criteria set out within the referred documents? Who would like to answer this one? I'll open that up to the panel.
I can take that, Neil.
Yeah, okay, Paul will take it.
Yeah, so with this revision that we've just done with the MAG, we've changed our policy slightly with the need requirement for foreign repair stations or repair stations based overseas. So the MAG will reflect the latest change to our policy. And basically, we just need a statement from an applicant, or when you're doing a renewal for a repair station, from the accountable manager, that they are still have a requirement to do work on US registered aircraft or components for installation on US registered aircraft. And this can be a current contract. You don't need to provide the contract. We just need a statement saying that. And if you're an applicant for initial approval, you could say you're pursuing a contract to do work on US registered aircraft or components on US registered aircraft. So we don't need any more third-party documents showing NREG aircraft or work orders or any type of contract. So just a statement from the accountable manager or an applicant seeking or continue to pursue the need for working on US aircraft.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Much appreciated. And then just moving on, we have a question here from Ian Hodges. What is the sufficient time for the US repair station to apply for a UK approval? Well, you're just on mute, Neil.
I was just wondering if Paul Cloutier would be able to tell the audience about the normal cycle time for processing renewals in the US.
Sure. So currently we have around 1,500 repair stations in the US that hold EASA approval. So we're anticipating probably the majority of those will be applying for a UK 145 certificate. And that's why we built this 2-year transition in, because we don't want to be have a huge influx of 1,500. It could be 1,500 applicants all at once. So we're trying to align the EASA expiration date with the UK 145 approval, so we can filter these in over a period of time. So like right now, all our EASA certificates, the renewals are spread out within a 2-year time frame. So we're trying to keep that in because it's working right now. We can manage the 1,500 EASA approvals. So we're just trying to align those dates up. And what Neil was saying earlier, this agreement, the revision of the MAG, it goes in effect January 1st. So we have some facilities in the United States, their EASA certificate is expiring in January or February or stuff like that. So it won't really be feasible to get a UK approval that quickly. So the 120 days that we're asking for, obviously that won't happen for those facilities. So when you get the supplement set up and you make application, just try to do it, as early as you can for your best convenience. And then possibly the next time we renew the EASA certificate, you could apply a little earlier with the UK 145 approval, trying to get the the expiration dates aligns, but it's, we'll work with everybody trying to get those through, but the main reason is we just don't want a huge influx of applicants. And also we realize, you know, some of these EASA certificates are going to be expiring, you know, first of the year. And most of them, you know, if you're January, you probably already made application to renew the EASA certificate, and we haven't even issued the revision for the MAG out yet to even see, you know, what the supplement is going to look like for US facilities.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Was there anything to add from our side, Neil, or happy to carry on?
No, please carry on. I think Paul gave a good answer to the lead times needed to process approvals.
Brilliant. Thank you. Next question here is just on the UK Part 145. It says UK Part 145 AMO PPB in UK, but no active approved line station in UK. Can this organisation obtain FAA approval under UK-US agreement within EU to set up a line station?
Okay, I think that's a question we need to just discuss with our colleagues, and we'll answer that after the meeting online.
Bro, thank you. I'll put that as a type answer there, and we can come back to that one.
Yeah.
And then just moving on, can a US repair station provide line maintenance at a station where no US registered aircraft are supported and only UK registered maintenance is required, i.e. only support UK customer at a station location? Pete, I think you wanted to answer this one.
Yes, Robert, I can take that one. The short answer is no. The US repair station will need to have active D107s for the US carriers, which they should have, and they will be able to add a UK carrier to an existing D107 line station, but they won't be able to initiate one with just a UK carrier. This is because the stations are already being overseen by our colleagues, and it's really just to keep the level of burden down. So the short answer for that question is no. Thank you, Robert.
Brilliant. Thank you, Pete. And then how long will it take FAA to grant initial approval if recommendation is made by UK CAA? Cole Christensen.
Yeah, I think Paul gave a good answer to this anyway. So we've said 120 days for a US-based repair station to apply and receive an approval. So that allows time for the FAA to do what they need to do, send us the recommendation to the UK, to the CAA, and then within that time, you know, given the time the FAA to do what they need to do, and given the time in the CAA to issue the approval certificate, that's why it's what we said, what Paul said before. It's about 120 days. But we clearly try and get that done quicker in that time. But that's the time scale we are saying we're looking for.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Craig Hamilton says, I'm based in the UK. If I subcontract work to a US repair station after the 31st of December 2024, then that repair station must have a UK CAA approval. Is this correct? We are currently dealing with a similar situation with EU and other non-bilateral country repair stations. Who would like to come and answer that one?
I'll take that one. The answer is yes. If you're going to place work with an organisation in the US and they want to support UK, either aircraft on the UK register or parts destined for an aircraft on the UK register, then a CAA approval will be required, and the way to obtain the approval is through the procedures in the bilateral.
Brilliant. Thank you. I've got a question here from Graham Bettridge. It says, and this will all be covered in the new MAG change 1. I'm not quite sure what Graham is referring to here, but Graham, I wondered whether you might want to come on screen just to answer your question there, or come off mute and just ask it to see what you was referring to. No, that's fine. We can come back to that one if Graham would like to.
Yeah,
we can pick it up offline.
Yeah, I think maybe Graham's just referring to the new maintenance or the new MAG. And yes, so the procedures for obtaining approval either side of the Atlantic are all set out in there.
Brilliant. Cheers, Neil. And then just another question here. I think this one's for you, Neil. If a UK located maintenance organisation contracts partial maintenance to a US located organisation and requests FAA, UK CAA and EASA release, can the US located contractor supply FAA 8130 referring to the UK CAA and EASA approvals via their respective MAGs on the same 8130 document?
Okay, so this is the triple or multiple release that we often get asked these questions about in all bilateral agreements. The answer is there are no multilateral agreements. So the way to do this is to issue two documents, one that meets the UK criteria, the UK US criteria, and the other 8130 to meet the FAA EASA criteria. If the part conforms with both sets of requirements, then that's absolutely fine. And so it's two separate documents. That's the way it works, and that's pretty much the same when you look at all other bilateral agreements. As yet, we haven't concluded any multilateral arrangements, so it has to be that way.
Brilliant, thank you. Robert Allway has asked, and this is quite a long one, so just bear with me here. UK-based Part 145 maintenance provider Bodgit and Scarpa Limited is both CAA and FAA approved. American operator Wild West Airways has contracted Bodgit and Scarpa to provide maintenance at London Heathwick Airport, and everything is listed on the D107. One Bodgit and Scarpa permanent employee, Mr. Smith, is not yet UK CAA Part 66 qualified, but this does hold a valid FAA A&P license. As this license cannot form the basis of an release to service authorization in the UK, can Mr. Smith's A&P license be used directly with the airline to release the Wild West Airways aircraft within the UK? Pete.
Well, that would be the result of a contractual arrangement between Bodgit and between Wild West Airlines and the license holder himself. It would sit entirely outside of the bilateral agreements. It wouldn't be covered under the Part 145 maintenance approval. So it would have to be an entirely contractual arrangement between the operator and the A&P license holder, and the A&P license holder would have to comply with any of the operator's requirements under training and authorization. So the short answer is it can be used as a release, but it's an entirely independent contract and there's nothing to do with the bilateral arrangements or the Part 145. Thank you.
Brilliant. And then Carl, I think this is a question for you. Is the acceptance of 8130 free dual until the 1st of the 12th, 2024 relevant to new and repaired overhauled items? Oh, you're just on mute, Carl. Sorry.
Right, that's better. Okay, is the acceptance of an 8130 dual until the 31st of 12/24, is it relevant to new and repaired parts? Well, new parts, again under Appendix 4 in the MAG Section A. So what's acceptable for new parts? It is a CAA Form 1 new, an 8130 new, and a CSC for standard parts. Now, if that part comes from elsewhere, then it's referencing any other bilateral agreements. So that's for new parts. For repaired parts, again, it depends on what the input is. If it comes in, as I said before, on a CAA Form 1 single, then it can only go on and out on a single release. If the part comes in with a dual CAA FA release and gets fitted to a higher assembly, then it can go out on a dual CAA FAA release. And I think the important thing again to reiterate is it's dependent upon the input and the output of the part. And it's really important to refer to that Appendix 4 in the MAG.
Brilliant. Thank you, Carl. And then just Moving on, I think this is another one for you, Carl, as well. With regard to dual EASA FAA release for parts, is this for repaired parts only? Is FAA 81303 single release acceptable for new parts?
Yeah, I think I answered that question before, so I think that covers both of those two questions.
Brilliant, thank you. And then just one here from Jim Hooker. Regarding the input-output information on a previous slide, a part that has only a single release FAA form 81303, which is used to repair a hire assembly, that hire assembly is only entitled to a single FAA form 81303 and therefore not eligible for installation onto a UK registered aircraft. Pete, did you want to come into this one and then obviously open it up to anyone else?
Hello, Jim. That's dependent. If the part going in on the single release FAA form 8130-3 was a new part and no other parts going into the assembly prevented a UK release, then yes, that would be eligible for a UK release, and you could release that as a dual UK FAA release. If the part you're talking about was a repaired part on an 8130, then that would prevent the dual release, in which case you could only make a single FAA release out of it. So it's dependent on whether the part that you're discussing is new or used. I hope that answers it, Jim.
Brilliant, thank you. And then just one here from an anonymous attendee. If an aircraft is made in the States, such as Cessna, sorry, I hope I pronounced that correctly, and the parts fitted to that aircraft are also made in the States, if we are to send the items to an FAA repair station, sorry, Mike, just jumping around. If we are to send the items to an FAA repair station, only, why is it that they can't be fitted to a G-Reg aircraft in the UK with a single release? Who would like to come in on that one?
I'll take that one. My colleagues have been battling off the other questions in the last couple of minutes. So the answer is, if it's a new part, then no problem. We've explained that a single release from a FAA approved production facility is acceptable. If it's maintained parts, then as we've explained, there are some special conditions that still need to be met in order for that part to be acceptable to install on our register. And that's the reason why we have the dual release. Now, in the big scheme of things, we are also working on some advice to the general aviation community about how it is possible to install parts with a single release. We're not covering that today in this session, but we are planning to have another session in the next couple of weeks specifically for the general aviation community to talk to them about some of the challenges that they may face and how within the existing rules we can process those things. Thank you.
Cheers, thank you, Neil. And then just one more here is it general knowledge in the US yet? And it was asked by Richard, when will the MAG update be published? I believe it's already published. Is that correct, Neil?
Yeah, so the MIP is published. The MIP went up on our website today. The MAG will definitely be up before the end of the year. I'd like to say in the next couple of weeks. My colleagues in the FAA are working hard to get everything cleared their end, so it will be available very soon. I think there might have been a question earlier about will we share these slides afterwards? Yeah, sure, we'll make those available, but the actual MAG will be another couple of weeks yet, I think, before we'll be able to publish it.
And then I think just on the question about it being general knowledge in the US, Paul or John, I know obviously I think you guys were preparing a webinar over in the States as well, so I don't know whether you wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, so yesterday we did a webinar for US industry and briefed. It was really just on section B, how to get a UK certificate in the US. So we went through that yesterday. We had a really big audience trying to get the word out, what's coming and some of the requirements. And we're also issuing a info. It's a memorandum that goes to all US air carriers, 135 operators, all operations. And it just covers the MIP and some of these dates and what's going to be required after December 31st, 2024. So we're trying to get the message out quite a bit. And we might have a few more webinars. We're talking about it right now for industry and internally in the FAA. But we're just trying to get this out as fast as we can. And then the MAG, as Neil was saying, we're really close to getting that published, and our goal is to get that out, this month or early next month.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. And then just moving on, Carl, I think I've got a question for you here. So until the US facilities get UK approval during the next 2 years, can we accept EASA release to service after December the 31st, 2022 for a G-Reg aircraft? Now, I know you mentioned there about letting the GA community know, but Carl, go on. Over to you.
Yeah, so we will accept a EASA FAA dual release up until the end of December 2024 for parts to be fitted onto G-Reg aircraft.
Brilliant. Thank you. And then I think this is the final question we've got. Can an individual who only holds A and P license allowed to certify and registered aircraft working within a UK Part 145 organisation under a bilateral agreement? If not, will this be reviewed?
Okay, so I'll answer that question. So the agreement at the moment recognises the approval issued to the organisation in its home state as the basis for the approval. So therefore, if you're releasing an aircraft to service in the US, the license that you would need to hold to be able to do that is an A&P. If it's here in the UK, the license that you'd be required to hold by your home approval is a Part 66 license. So it doesn't cover using the A&P in the UK or this Part 66 license in the US. If the facility was located outside of the UK and it was covered by the bilateral, then Appendix 4 of Part 145 would apply, and therefore you might have the license of the state in which your line station is located. But so in summary, you can't use a A&P in the UK under FAA 145 repair station approval issued to a UK company, and you can't use a Part 66 license in the US if you're a repair station in the US that wishes to release a UK registered aircraft. So that should keep things fairly simple. I mean, obviously, if it is an aircraft that doesn't require release to service under FAR 145 and it's within the scope of the A&P license holder, then they may be able to do that as under their personal license privilege, but that's outside the scope of this MASA. Brilliant.
Thank you, Neil. Just a couple more questions have come in here. An anonymous attendee says, really good news on the post-Brexit relationship between the CAA and the FAA. Building on this new but old relationship, will we be exploring total acceptance of each other's systems for repair?
Okay, so I'm happy to answer that partially. We would like to move to that place. There was some work that was done in ICAO a few years ago that set out a framework for mutual acceptance or mutual recognition of maintenance organisations. However, we've not been able to move to that point during this round of negotiations. I don't know if my colleagues on the FAA want to say anything on that subject, but it would be nice to achieve that goal at some point in the future where it is appropriate to do so.
Yeah, I really don't have any more to add. I know, like with the US, we have one mutual recognition, it's with Canada. But going forward, I know how our regulations are written, are legal. We always need to have the, we have the responsibility for issuing a certificate, because that's how our regulations are lined up. So any maintenance done on any US registered aircraft, you need to hold an FAA certificate. Either it's an individual license or it's a Part 121, 135, 145. So going forward, we'll always have to issue a certificate. So we're looking at streamlining some of the processes, which might help, and we have some ideas, but like Neil said, we're still a ways off.
Yeah, just
a supplement to further back up to Paul's answer. Excuse me, all. Regarding our agreement with Canada, that I've done a bit of research on that, and it actually goes all the way back to post-World War II. Before there was even an FAA, there was a Civil Aviation Board here, and our current FAR's Federal Aviation regulations were not even in place back in those days. So this is kind of a legacy agreement that's there. Under the present regulatory structure, as Paul has indicated, it's not possible. Anything is possible going forward. It's going to take a lot of legal work on our side to achieve that mutual recognition. It's a, let's say, a long-term goal, but it's going to be a long-term goal, unfortunately. So.
Brilliant. Thanks. So I'm going to make these the last two questions before I just open it out to any final remarks from the panelists. There's this one here for Pete. After 31st December 2024, can parts be fitted to G-Reg aircraft with only FAA 8130 EASA?
If the 8130 is dated prior to the 31st of December 2024, then the answer is yes. If it's dated post that, then the answer is no. Thank you.
Brilliant. And then just one more here from Tim Foxton. I thought we had adopted the AMCs, AMC1, MA501A1 classification installation need the decision 2021-009R, EASA form 1 or equivalent, a document equivalent to the EASA form may be 1, a release document issued by an organisation under the terms of a bilateral agreement signed by the European Union. Neil, I know you wanted to come in on
Yeah,
this one.
thank you. So Tim raises a really important point, actually. The AMC material that's out there to the continuing airworthiness rule at the moment holds good till the end of this year, which is all part of those Brexit transition period. After the end of the year, we will be, well, in the run up to the end of the year, we'll be changing the AMC to recognise the new arrangements. So effectively, that will mean parts issued with an EASA Form 1 that have been maintained by an organisation approved by one of the member states of the EU or directly approved by EASA in a third country. Those parts, you could continue to install those parts as long as they were released to service prior to the end of this year. After that, if it's an organisation that holds the EASA 145 approval and it's located in Europe, they need to obtain a UK approval. If it's an organisation located in another state where we have a bilateral agreement, then the part would be acceptable under the terms of that agreement. So if it's the case of the US agreement we've been talking about today, got some details of that. I think we've covered that quite comprehensively. If it was a part that had been maintained in Canada, for instance, where we have mutual recognition, it could be released on a Canadian release document. So I hope that's clarified things. So the AMC as it stands only remains in place until the end of this year, i.e. the end of the transition period.
Brilliant. Thank you, Neil. And then I will ask this the two final questions here. Are there any changes to PMA parts to be aware of with the latest MIP? And as the FAA, will they have a program to recognise USA companies for the UK CAA? So just the two final questions there.
Okay, so the PMA piece, I can answer that. So if you look in the IPA, which are the acceptance procedures for design and production, you'll see that PMA parts remain acceptable for installation on UK registered aircraft, as long as they're not a critical part. If they are a critical part, they can still be installed, but only when the PMA itself has been validated here in the UK, which is no change to the position that you'd be familiar with the EASA rules. So that's PMA. And the last one, SCFA will have a program to recognise US companies or the CAA. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand that question. I don't know, Neil, if you're able to open your mic, perhaps you could just come back on that one.
If not, I know Cole said he would like to answer that one.
I think what Neil is asking is the Will the FAA recognise CAA approved organisations? I think, well, the bilateral covers that. So like in the UK, we recognise a US based repair station that makes an application. Similarly, if you are a US based repair station, provided you meet all of the necessary provisions of the MAG and demonstration of need, all of those things we've covered, the FAA would recognise a UK-based 145 maintenance organisation. I think that's what is meant by that question. I could be wrong, but I think that's what it is.
Brilliant. Thank you. So I think that brings a close our questions here. What I wanted to do for the final kind of 10 minutes or so is just perhaps go around the panel just to provide any kind of final thoughts on this agreement. So Neil, I'll start with you and then I'll go around to everyone just to give some of their thoughts.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Robert. Well, first of all, I'd like to say really a big thank you to our colleagues in the FAA for working with us and for us producing so much written material in the last 3 years or so in order to get ready for Brexit, and then now this shift in our position after we've left the EU. It's really been a joy to do that, and we're hoping that once we've implemented these new processes, things will calm down for a while and that we won't be changing our processes and the industry will get used to the new arrangements and that they will stabilise. I'd also like to say to UK industry, we're really pleased that there's no change to the arrangements for the nearly 200 organisations in the UK who have FAA repair station approval, such that they can continue trading on the same terms as they've been enjoying when we were still in the EU. I think that's really important. After that, I'd say we've chosen an extended transition date with our colleagues in the FAA, one, to recognise the close cooperation that we have with them, and two, to ensure that there's plenty of time to move across. So please don't forget the deadlines, because they are still 2 years away, and do please encourage organisations in the US to apply in good time so that the approval base is there at the end of 2024, because we don't have any more legal tricks up our sleeve to move things further on or exemption possibilities. So if you're not in the game at the end of 2024, the only way in is to get an approval. That's it from me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Neil. I'll go to Pete, then go to Carl, and then bring in Paul and John. Pete.
I've got nothing further to add, really, to what Neil has said. Again, thank you very much to our FAA colleagues for working with them and all the support that they've given us, and look forward to seeing how the agreement gets rolled out. That's it. Thank you.
Carl.
No, well, the only thing I think Neil's covered the key points really. It's just to reiterate that please don't leave it till the end of 24 to make your application, and just to give the FAA time and give us time in the UK to issue the approval certificate, because we don't want, I don't think having a gap in between when you apply and the end of 24 would be good for anybody, ourselves, FCAA, FAA, and also the organisations as well. So yeah, don't leave it too late. That's it. Thank you, Robert.
Paul, and then we'll close with John. Well, whichever way works best for you guys.
Sure. Yes. Thank you, everybody, for your time and attending. You know, when we started this a few years ago, our main goal was trying to have as minimum disruption through industry and internally with the CAA and the FAA's workforce. So that's kind of why we built in these 2-year transitions. And we really, worked as a team, all of us together, trying to really, fine tune this MAG that's coming out. But again, there's really no changes to FAA facilities in the UK, and the majority of this is basically for US facilities seeking UK 145 approval. But thank you again.
Thank you, Paul. John.
I'll be very brief, because I think everyone has captured the main points. It has been a very a great pleasure to work with you guys. And hopefully we've achieved our goals, as Paul's iterated, indicated to accomplish this, but with the MIP and the SIP and the IPA, to make this transition as seamless as possibly could. It's been a great effort. It's been good working with everyone. I greatly appreciate it. Great team spirit. And I will do my best now to get that MAG through the final wickets on our side so we can get it up and published as soon as we can so everybody can see it. And I think I'll end with that. Thank you very much, everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I do have one final slide just to share, so bear with me. I think this is it the question on this one, Neil, or is it the
just wanted to say to everybody, if you do have any further questions, and I'm sure you will, please drop us a line at that email address there, and we will do our very best to answer that question swiftly. And if it's something that is really of a specific or of a general nature that should be shared with everybody, we'll also find a way of putting some sort of Q&A on our website. So please take note of that email address there, and we will get back to you just as soon as we're able to.